Well, good morning. It is so good to be back with you. It's been a number of years. Matter of fact, we were talking earlier, I think probably about 15 years ago, I was here to talk to you about a new adventure for Lutheran Services and for this congregation, and that was as we started to talk about building Trinity Grove, the nursing home. And I was here before that, back around 1982. So some of you were around back then when we were talking about building what 40 years later we're getting ready to open in 2022 in the same location down toward Monkey Junction, Trinity Landing, our retirement center down there. I can't help but when I hear the story of the Good Samaritan, I think about our ministry, Lutheran Services Carolinas, but I also have to think about Mr. Rogers. You know, when Mr. Rogers said, and many of us grew up with him, could you be my neighbor? No, wait a minute, he didn't say neighbor. He said neighbor. Neighbor is a word that's been with all of us, all of our lives, through church and through Mr. Rogers and the like. So I feel like I go a long way back with this congregation to 82, but we go back even further than that, Lutheran Services Carolinas and St. Paul's. In 1960, Lutheran Services was actually started up in Hickory, North Carolina, and it was started by you, by the congregations of the North Carolina Synod, who said, you know, we can do more together. We can take care of our elders if we start a ministry that can provide those services. So you all were involved in the start of that ministry in 1960. Just a few years later, you were likewise involved when Lutheran Family Services was started in the 70s to provide ministries for child and family services, which about 12 years ago, we put those two things together, the good chocolate and the good peanut butter, and we made something even better, Lutheran Services Carolinas. Our families go back a long way. Pastor Jonathan and his parents and my parents were at Lenore Ryan together and at seminary together. So I have known the Conrad family all these years. You know, the lessons, every one of the lessons today, I'm sure that was not coincidental, point to the ministry that each of us has in our personal lives and at St. Paul's and across the church to love our neighbor. The gospel about the Good Samaritan is all about you and your Lutheran Services Carolinas. We're not in this thing separately, we're in this together. In Deuteronomy that we read today, be open-handed toward your fellow Israelites who are poor and needy in your land. You know, Christ told us there in the Good Samaritan story to love our neighbor. Over 500 years ago, Martin Luther advocated for a common chest for the community coming together to serve neighbors that were in need. 500 years ago, more than 500 years ago now. Especially after the Civil War in this country, Lutherans all over this country, and you know, we're not the biggest denomination by far. Matter of fact, we're not one of the top 2 or 3. But Lutherans said, we can do more together than we can do separately. And so back over 150 years ago, and especially right after the Civil War in the North and the South, Lutherans got together and said, we can create organizations that can help serve our orphans from the war, our widows from the war, and others that need our services. Since then, over 300 Lutheran organizations have been developed just like Lutheran Services Carolinas. Some are a lot smaller and some are a whole lot bigger, but we're all doing our work together, serving across this country. And even right here in the Carolinas, we started in 1888 was really where we first got our started, when Lutherans across the South said, you know, we need to get together and start a home for elders to take care of those folks. And we need to start an orphanage to take care of children. So this ministry goes back even further than our incorporation in 1960. And then nationally, over 80 years ago, Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Services was formed to resettle millions of Lutherans and others that were displaced after World War II. Then they've done the same for other refugee groups ever since, so continue to do that work. And then I think of Lutheran disaster response, one of the gems of our church, of the Lutheran Church, that serves all over this country anywhere there's a disaster. And they have served with us right here in the Carolinas. And Lutheran World Relief does the same on the international level. Now let's bring it back a little closer to home. Some of you will remember Abba Lawson Crumpler. She's the one that brought me down here in 1982 because she had a vision to build a home for elders in eastern North Carolina. She kind of got tired of all of our services being up there around Hickory and Salisbury areas, those areas in the central part of the state. She wanted to see something down here to serve closer to home. And St. Paul's was a huge part of that, and I happened to be here. I can't go far from home. I worked for Lutheran Services 3 years back then. I was here when Ms. Crumpler gave the property. I left for 7 years, and then I came back ever since, the last 31 years. I don't change jobs very often. But this congregation has supported this ministry in so many different ways. We are the church together. Ms. Crumpler had that vision, gave us 30 acres of land. We added 20 to it. It took us 40 years. You know, I keep going back to, I believe it's Ecclesiastes, everything in its time. It has taken us 40 years. That's something biblical about that, to accomplish that mission. But we're on the verge of doing that in the 40th year that we were given that gift. You've given leadership. I think about Francis Lamb, that's on our board today, Lee Weddle, C.D. Gerganus. I know Beth Pottle was at the earlier service. Her dad, Bill Britton, was one of my predecessors with Lutheran Services, Lutheran Family Services in the Carolinas. And I will never forget going to his receiving, and it looked like the United Nations. There were so many people from so many different cultures that were there to pay respects to the man that was a legend in child and family services, not just in North Carolina, but across this country. So there are just lots of connections. Pastor Jonathan has been so supportive and actually blessed our construction as we started construction at Trinity Landing. Pastor Mark, Pastor John, I remember Pastor John standing up in a Synod assembly and saying, if Lutheran Services says they're going to build a nursing home in Wilmington, they'll build a nursing home in Wilmington. And we did. That's now our Trinity Grove that we're all as a church so proud of. Again, we are the church together. We cannot do all these things separately, but together. And that's where I think there's some value in having an organization like Lutheran Services Carolinas. That's where the Synod comes in, our North Carolina Synod. We can do things together that we can't do, and then nationally through our ELCA, our National Lutheran Church. Your apportionment and your support of those organizations makes all this possible for all of us. We don't always agree with everything that I'm sure we don't agree with each other, with our spouses, with everything. We don't agree on everything, I'm sure, in this congregation, or at the Synod level or at the national level. But when you look at all the things that make us whole, all the things that we do agree on, the good certainly outweighs the few things that we might disagree with along the way. So Lutheran social ministry organizations like Lutheran Services Carolinas were created to be an expression of the church, to love our neighbors, to be able to provide that love. Lutheran Services takes that to John 10:10. I came that they may have life and have it abundantly. We can't have abundant living if our neighbors don't have abundant living also. So Lutheran Services has continued to grow from that one little about 50-bed nursing home in Hickory, North Carolina, to now serving in both North and South Carolina in so many different ways. From on the child and family side, from foster care to developmental disabilities, to traumatic brain injury, veterans services, refugee services, disaster case management across both states. And then, of course, in senior services, some of the things like you see right here that are being developed in your backyard and other senior services type programs. Now let's get a little closer to home. Thanks to you all, Wilmington has just become a hotbed of social ministry. Part of that is just what you do right here in this church, your social ministry programs right here in your congregation. But then together, you have helped us. You've given us space for our Victims of Human Trafficking program here at the church. You've given us space here. We're now serving 17 people who are victims of human trafficking, which is just horrendous, and it seems like that's not possible today, and yet it is very possible today. Our foster care program, which is also based out of this congregation, taking care and given a whole life, the rest of their life, to foster children. We're serving about 13 children already here in this area. And then, of course, you know Trinity Grove with its 100 beds that we're serving all the time, and Trinity Landing that will open this coming year with 208 independent living apartments. And that hopefully will continue to grow in this community. You know, we try to leave the politics out of all this. That's a different debate for a different venue. Our job is just to, and it's kind of hard in this polarized environment that we live in, but our job is just to be the neighbor and just to love the neighbor. I'll leave the politics debates and try to stay out of that, the line of fire there, but to continue to do the work in serving those that are put in our face, whether that be that victim of human trafficking or that elder that needs a nursing home, to serve where we're needed most, to serve the neighbor. I was going to talk to you a little bit about the Be the Light campaign, but I thought, why would I do that when we have one of the two co-chairs for our state Be the Light campaign, and that's Francis Lamb. So Francis, I'd like to invite you up to do a little temple talk, and then I'll finish up.
In the course of this, Pastor Jonathan asked me, Francis, will you please share your passion for Lutheran Services? He gave me 1 to 3 minutes. My passion is way beyond that. This man helps feed that passion all the time. We as Lutheran Services Carolinas could not do what we do without this man and without the staff. What we do is to minister to people. I want to share just a little bit about what we do and bring it home to you, to this congregation. Ted's told you all the areas that we work in. We are so blessed to have workers that consider their job not just a job, but their own ministry. It's very difficult in some ways for me to tell this story because it brings about a lot of emotion to me. But I just want to tell you how much your participation in Lutheran Services means. You've given things to Trinity Grove residents during the pandemic when their families couldn't have been there. You've given backpacks to our foster kids. You've given Christmas presents. You've given quilts to the disaster areas. We had a member of our own congregation that I really didn't know well. I had only seen him in church. And the wife called me and said, Francis, the pastor said, you could perhaps walk me through the procedure to get my husband in Trinity Grove. And I said, I'll be glad to. I'll see what we can do. Let's talk about what you need to do. I can look over here in this section and still see Arlene and Tom. I helped Arlene walk through the process of getting Tom into Trinity Grove. Tom really didn't know me. He had been sick with cancer, of course. He had been in other nursing facilities and had been so unhappy. I wanted to check and see how he was doing, so I went over to Trinity Grove, and I went to his room. He wasn't there. He was down in the barber shop getting his hair cut. And I walked in, and I introduced myself and held out my hand to shake his hand and to see how things were going. Tom took my hand, and he kissed it. That, to me, will go with me forever, because it wasn't my hand he was kissing. It was yours. It was everyone who has participated in helping with Trinity Grove. He was saying, I love Trinity Grove. I love these people. And when I talked with Arlene to get her permission to tell this story, she said, yes. Tom said, it's like being at home. We are embarking now on a campaign in Lutheran Services, which we've been involved about a year in various areas, talking with individuals. We'll be talking with congregations, and it's called the Be the Light campaign. We have a brochure like this that I will be glad to share with any of you. Our goal is $4.2 million to increase our services so that we may reach out again to people like Tom, to people perhaps like my husband who have had traumatic brain injury. One of the things that we would like to do is to have two places, two homes for those with traumatic brain injuries. One of the things we always say is we walk together with those that we serve. I want to say thank you as our congregation for walking with these people. And I ask you, as we enter the congregational phase here at St. Paul's, that you walk with us and let us help others who need our services.
Thank you, Frances. Back to the gospel. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself. Thank you for allowing Lutheran Services Carolinas to be the church together with you, and I'm using the church with a big C, the church together to serve our neighbors. Amen.